Anytime you've got any party with non-opposition rule for that long, bad things are going to happen.
One party rule is the media's fault. Zach Abraham, hello. I thought of you this weekend because we were gambling in Vegas. And you're a money manager, so I have to imagine gambling your money is not something you advise your clients to do?
No, and actually, it always surprised. And to be fair, a lot of guys, for whatever reason, that manage money do enjoy to gamble and do enjoy to play cards. I
Mm-hmm.
don't at
Yeah.
all. And so that kind of always shocks everybody. But yeah, I always tell people, look, if you invest correctly, the odds can be in your favor. If you play certain games at the casino perfectly, they're still slightly in the house's favor. So, call me crazy, but I like to win games that I can have an advantage at.
Yeah, I play blackjack only because I feel like there's a little skill involved in that. It's not like pulling the thing on a slot machine.
And yeah, there's a social aspect. So the one thing I will do is if we get some guys together, I'll sit around a blackjack table and have some fun. But the problem that I've always had with it is that um, you know, I'm never gonna bet an amount of money that is significant,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yep.
so like that matters. And so then I find myself inevitably sitting there grinding over a hand and there's a meaningless amount of money at stake. And I'm just sitting there going, what am I doing? I'd rather be by the pool right now or watching a game or you know what I mean? Like just it feels like work.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it and I always look at it as an entertainment fee. I'll usually like
Yeah.
$500 will be sort of, if I, play for a few hours with my friends or whatever, my husband, entertainment fee. But I got my husband to walk away up, which he'll never do. And so, he made enough money to pay for our trip at the blackjack
Pro-
table.
Progress. Hey, there we go. So it's a free trip.
Free trip, basically. Yes. So,
I
all
love it.
right, let's get to some watchdogging. So I don't know in the country whether there's been a bigger taxpayer funded boondoggle than Sound Transit in Washington state. I mean, I think it's exceeded sort of the, maybe on par with the high speed train to nowhere in California. There's been a lot of these, but Sound Transit has just been in a league of its own. For people who aren't familiar, Sound Transit is like our train system that we've been trying to build. So years behind schedule, billions of dollars that have been wasted, way over budget. So Change Washington had this great report, billions wasted, zero consequences, no one fired, demoted, or punished. And so it talks about all these issues over many, many years with Sound Transit and the fact that no one's ever been held accountable for it. And I would even say, so the King County executive, the former King County executive, Dow Constantine, he ended his time in office early and left to take over as the head of Sound Transit. Despite, being a board member for Sound Transit for all those years, presiding over this waste, fraud, and abuse, really, I would characterize it as. And then he gets this $600,000 job being in charge of Sound Transit. It's just the difference between the public sector and the private sector.
Well, it totally is. It also is a cautionary tale, and this is something that I really sincerely wish the voters of this state could wrap around their head or wrap around their brain, which is, much in life, just like with economies, just like on football teams competition is a wonderful thing, and competition acts as kind of a watchdog, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and keeps people honest. And when you have a scenario in a state where where the media is captured, right, by one side or the other, and then on top of it, one party has dominated the state's politics for better than 20 years. You're going to run into these problems 100% of the time. And I'll even push out and say, um, I think that it goes for regardless of which state is, or excuse me, what party governs that state, right? I think that anytime you've got any party with non-opposition rule for that long, bad things are going to happen, and you're going to see mismanagement of funds. You're going to see you're going to see wasted money. You're going to see big deficits. You're going to see all that because elections are accountability for elected officials. And, this state is a perfect example. You can be an elected official in this state, break your word 100 times, do things that you said you weren't going to do, and you're never held accountable. You're never, unless you get primaried by your own party. unless you're not extreme enough. That's literally the only thing you have to worry about in the state is getting primaried from the more extreme side of the party. And it's a sad state of affairs because people are like, oh well, and you hear it all the time. People going, oh, I hate this, I hate that, I'm for this, our blue all the time, and then they go on a tirade about all the things that are broken and dysfunctional in the state,
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking at them going, okay, I didn't ask you to be Sherlock Holmes here, but can we just tie these two threads together, maybe just a little, right? And look at, if things are not going well in this state, there's only one thing to blame, right? Nobody else makes any calls. So if you don't like where food prices are, if you don't like where gas prices are, if you don't like the fact you can't take your kids downtown Seattle, if you don't like all of these things, and there's too many to name, then like I've said, wake up and realize that either you need to support other candidates inside of the party, or we need to figure out something because for democracy to work, there have to be two sides.
Yeah.
And anytime you get in an area where there's not, these things happen and we all pay the price.
Yeah, and I've said that about one party rule for a long time. It's like now you're grading yourself, you're grading your own tests and you're giving yourself an A every time, of course, because if you're going to grade your own test, why do you have to be honest? And then when the media is not holding you accountable, you would have to be the one to say, hey, we're not doing a good job, let's change things. And they're not willing to do it. They don't want to do it. And really it is the media's fault. One party rule is the media's fault. I don't believe that we would have one party rule in a state like Washington if the populace at large really understood what was creating the crises that we're in. And the responsibility is the media. Politicians are going to do what politicians do. The media is responsible for making sure that they're held accountable. And the media simply refuses to do that. I mean, this is a crazy off example, has nothing to do really with our show. But there was a Tacoma assistant principal this past week who in 2019, he raps about committing a school shooting. Like very graphic rap lyrics. He's black. And at the time, the media kind of covered it, but they're like, oh, is this artistic expression? No big deal. And then he came out last week and was posting that America has a white male problem. And in light of Charlie Kirk and all that stuff, and he's saying America has a white male problem. Everything that ails our country is basically white man bad. And I made the point, if this had been a white teacher saying that about black males, you would have been fired instantly. It would have been a news story right away. None of the media outlets have covered it. Not one. And that just shows you that they're so beholden to the left's narrative. Even something as obvious like, hey, you can't say that as a school teacher. You just can't. They won't touch it. So until the media issue is fixed, the state is going to continue, and Sound Transit's going to continue to get away with rampant waste with no accountability.
Yeah, it is such a strange state of affairs where we can just get up there and make objectively racist statements
Yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
are divisive, that are dangerous, that even in the light of political assassinations, we're not changing our tune. Where is we have a white male. The re-injection of racism, or now the belief that reverse racism is somehow the opposite of racism, is so intellectually insulting, and it is so sophomoric. I want to look at those people and go, if you were smarter, you'd be embarrassed, right? You lack the intellect necessary for the shame and embarrassment that should accompany those views, right? We have a white male problem. We don't have a color problem. There is no, that is the, I mean, that is the height of racism, right? A problem is the pigment of somebody's skin. No, the problem is the breakdown of the nuclear family. The problem is not enough two-parent homes. The problem is an education system that doesn't teach, it indoctrinates. The problem is the soft racism of low expectations. The problem is all of those things. It is not have to do with the pigment in anybody's skin. And oh, by the way, when did being a good liberal mean completely contradicting the words of Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yeah.
Right? Judge a man by the content of his character, not the color of his skin. Where did that go? It's just it is so infuriatingly stupid, because then we have to sit back and pretend like the amount of melanin. It's like going back. It's like, hey, why don't we start new Jim Crow laws that are only affixed to white people. Let's do it, right? That'd be the opposite of racism. And you're sitting there going, guys, the whole point was the stupidity of judging somebody by the tint or amount of melanin in their skin. The point was not which side of it was good or bad, right? It was the ridiculousness of the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why that guy should lose his job. First and foremost, you're too stupid to be teaching kids. And no, that isn't a black man problem. That's a dumb man problem. And we do have that issue in this state. There's no question. And he is example number one. Well, not number one. He's in a long esteemed
He's
line of
he's on
guys
the
that
list.
deserve that trophy. Yeah, but I mean, it's just it in an age of technology and science and all that kind of stuff where we know for a fact, like, you know, racism has always been such a ridiculous concept if you had the ability to sit back and observe people.
Yeah.
But especially now in an age of science where we know that there are no differences, right? It truly is just an amount of melanin. Now we're regressing. Now the key forward is to blame all white people. We got a white people problem. Let's resegregate college campuses. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's just insanity.
Well, no, and then there's this whole, to our point, and the reason I bring up that example is it's something that's so blatantly wrong, right? And so blatantly obvious, but the media won't touch it because it's about race and it would make Democrats look bad. And so we're not even going to address it. So you have this whole segment of the state that hasn't even heard of it. They don't even know that there's a vice principal in the Tacoma School District that has said all these horrible things. And so they're just completely blind to it. And so to a larger degree, that's what we're seeing with one party rule is the media is keeping people in the dark about things that they should be aware of so that they can inform themselves and vote better. And I'm not even saying vote better like vote for Republicans. I'm not even a Republican. I don't care about the party structure. But there are Democrats out there who haven't lost their minds, who care about public safety, who care about these things, who care about fraud and waste, who want government entities and taxpayer funds to be actually working and being spent well. But people the media is not allowing them to have the information they need to make the best decision.
No, they're not, and they're effectively strangling, intellectually strangling these people because, I look, it irritates me because I believe at the core of it, everybody, regardless of how busy they are, has a civic responsibility to understand issues,
That's
and
true.
I think with 25 to 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, an adult can stay up on these things and figure out a way to stay informed and
Yeah.
understand what they're voting for, and I believe they have that responsibility. That being said, the media was supposed to be the watchdog that was supposed to do a lot of that work for us, right? That's the primary function, and to keep the political class on their toes and to keep them honest. At some point, they became part of the political class. They are the information arm, if you will, of the Democratic Party in the state, and it is. I think it's foolish to try to argue that that's not the case.
I agree.
What is more odd though is that you sit there and you go, you know, I grew up. I know Lincoln High School very well, and I grew up playing it and had a lot of friends that went there and all that kind of stuff. Lincoln High School is a very much integrated school. There's every race goes there, okay, including white people. How is it that you can allow somebody running a school paid for with government funds sit there and say white men are the problem when white men go to his school, right? And then furthermore, how can you sit there and look and say those kids are going to get a fair shake when
They're
the
not.
president, the guy that leads that school says we got a white male problem? Does that improve race relations? Does that close divides? Does that get us any closer to realize? Here's the other thing, and this is something that it irritates me because any successful human being on earth knows this, right? That progress is made when you quit making excuses. Progress is made when you quit finding scapegoats. Okay? We will not fix any of the issues that plague the black community as long as you're looking for a reason outside of the black community that's the cause. Now, am I saying that there are not reasons outside of the black community that are causes for? Of course I'm not. But what I'm saying is any successful person would say you must focus on the things you can control. If there are evil, racist white people behind the scenes, you're not going to change their mind.
Mhm.
Focus on what you can control, right? Focus on getting better. Anybody that's sitting there telling young black men that somebody else is to blame for your plight, that is somebody that isn't their friend and isn't interested in their success, because a friend tells you you can do it and shows you how. An enemy tells you you can't do it and won't show you anything,
Yeah.
right? They placate you, and it keeps you in you're right, it keeps you stuck. And so it's so irritating to me, not just because it's stupid and it's foolhardy on the face of it and it's ridiculous, but as long as we go down that intellectual path, far more black kids will buy into this nonsense rather than understanding the truth that they are their own ticket out.
Yeah.
And you will never get where you want to go by scapegoating and blaming others. You just won't. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and we can't have the double standard. Like I said, if it were a white vice principal who said we have a black male problem at a school like that one that's so has such a diverse student population, they'd be fired instantly. The media would
And
absolutely do
rightfully
a story
so.
on it, and rightfully so. It would be like, well,
Yeah.
that's an insane thing to say. Yeah, and you brought up the point earlier about, I agree that the populace has some responsibility. You need to make sure that you're fact checking everything and then you're not just believing something you're told by whatever the media outlet is, even, if it's me and it's somebody who likes my show. Make sure that you're looking to different sources. So I do believe there is some sort of responsibility. But when you look at some of these issues, the media is really the only option for people. I mean, we were talking about sound transit and years of waste, billions over. Like, how is a regular citizen going to know about any of this if the media doesn't make sure that they know about it? Like, is the regular citizen they'd have to attend like a sound transit board meeting, and they'd have to look at the books themselves, and it's just not realistic. And so
Right.
it's kind of crazy how reliant the American populace almost has to be on the media to actually inform them about what's going on. And that's why, to me, I harp so much on my former colleagues in the news, because they have such a profound responsibility and they're failing at that responsibility so much. And I have to just look at them and like, do you have no shame? Have you stopped caring? What do you believe your responsibility is? It's really stunning to me to see how bad the media has become. But who am I? I'm just a lady with a podcast. Who am I, Zach? I don't know.
Well,
What do I know?
no, but well, I mean, you know enough to recognize the problems for what it is,
Yeah.
and and you see that all over our culture. You see it going on in the media. The exact same dynamic plays out on every single college campus across the country,
Yeah.
and there is such a condescension and cynicism to it that just doesn't get recognized. Meaning, like, think about the condescension in it's not good enough for me to tell you what happened. I need to tell you what to think of it.
Yeah.
Right. And we're going to skip the facts. We're going to get right to the conclusions. And here's how you should respond to that. It's so cynical. It really is. It is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly cynical. And it's sad. I felt like the Charlie Kirk thing was such a perfect example of this, right? Like, you heard people, multiple, like, sitting there, and seemingly decent people that weren't celebrating his death, but were horrified at the popularity of his ideas because he was racist. And while you're sitting there listening to these people talk, you could tell right out of the gate that they were legitimately concerned. They were not hateful. They believed everything that they had heard, and
Mm-hmm.
they believed this guy was a racist.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there listening to it going, he never said anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, part of you wanted to go, hey, congratulations, I got great news for you, right? What you're all freaked out and worried about, it's not the truth.
Yeah.
Go pull up a video. It's right there for you. And that to me is the perfect example, because why do they think he's a racist? Because that's what they've been told.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what he said. Nobody's told them what he said. Nobody told them the arguments he made. Nobody said that. They just said Islamophobe, homophobe, xenophobe, transphobe, racist, hates black people, blah, blah, blah. Just label him and move on. And then everybody believes it. And you go, that guy didn't have a bone of hate in his body.
No.
He
You
he co-founded Turning Point USA with black people.
you have to want to know the truth. You have to want to know the truth, regardless of what it means for your side. And there's just too many people who they would rather just put a blindfold on if it is better for their side. And that's really, the problem across the board of the country right now.
Yep.
All right, let's end by helping people make some money moves. So explain this to me, CNBC. The Fed cut its interest rate, but long-term rates, including those on mortgages, went higher. So Fed cuts interest rates, but long-term rates go higher. Why?
Okay, so first and foremost, whenever we're answering a question like that and we're talking about a market that's as big as the US Treasury market, it could be any one thing. So, for instance, Today, if rates have moved higher since then, it's because buyers weren't willing to buy them at current rates and they bid at higher rates and sellers sold them. Okay, so that's first and foremost. But the Federal Reserve, when they change rates, they change it on the very front end of the rate curve. And what that means is the federal funds rate is the annual rate of interest that they pay to their member banks, right? So it's like the bottom rung of the interest rate stack. It's the bottom rate. And then everything from there on, right? All rates come off of that level. And if you've got really good credit, you'll probably get financed to buy a home and a car not too far away from that federal funds rate. But when you start now talking about 10 and 30-year more US government bonds, which is basically the US mortgage is based off of the 10-year US government bond. You can make an argument that it's 30, but the average mortgage in the United States refinances every I want to say like it's like 10 or 11 years.
Hmm.
So really it tracks the rate of, but here's the issue. Because we've got so much debt and we have to continue to print so much debt to finance the deficits that we're running, that one of the concerns we had about interest rate cuts was that the front end of the curve would come down because the Fed has total control over that. But as the front end comes down, it means that increased government spending becomes less and less expensive, right? Because it's cheaper to spend. So one of our fears was that you could see the Federal Reserve cut rates. And because of credit risk or perceived credit risk of the federal government, that the long end, 10, 20, and 30-year US government bonds could sell off. And we could get the exact opposite of what we were looking for. Now, that's what's happened so far. It hasn't done it in a dramatic way. But this is the tough part about monetary policy. And in my opinion, the fact that we've way overused it, meaning you push a button too many times, eventually that the efficacy of that button push goes away,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just the way it works. And that's where you're at right now. And that's what was so concerning to us is you're in a situation where you look at our debt load and you look at the amount of debt that we're going to have to issue over the coming years, we just don't have the control over our rate complex like we used to have. And it's a reality that people need to start dealing with. And it's why the answer is not always cut rates. Sometimes you got to go through unpleasant times. And a lot of the things that we are dealing with right now are direct consequences of trying to avoid unpleasant times and 15 years of effectively 0% interest rates and endless stimulus and quantitative easing and Operation Twist and all of these machinations, right? You cannot just keep doing these things and not expect a bill to come due at some point.
Yeah.
And so, look, I'm not saying like the big bill is coming due, but what I'm saying is that this gives you a preview of why we cannot just keep printing our way out of every problem, because eventually we'll get to a point where we will get the exact opposite of what we were trying to get. And you're kind of seeing a preview right now with that in long-term rates.
So for individual people, does that, I mean, it sounds like all of those things, there's this unpredictability. So, you have people who are waiting to buy a home. They're like, well, I want to see if the rates go down. Like my sister right now, they want to buy a house. They live in Florida. And she saw this and she brought it up to me on the phone this morning. I mean, and she's like, well, maybe we end up waiting. Can you even, with any degree of certitude, like wait something like that out? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, look, what you have to do, in my opinion, here is you've got to play the percentages. Um, I think that you need to look, if you're buying a house right now, you're buying it at record and affordability,
yeah, yeah,
right? If look, I'm not going to give you a read one way or the other because the tough thing about housing is that nobody ever quits needing it, right?
hmm,
What I would tell people is that I honestly believe that as it relates to housing, and a lot of assets right now. I think that patience is going to serve you well, would be my belief. And the other side of it is there's there's interesting things that you can do to try to offset because one of the fears, right, of waiting to buy a home is that they don't come down and they keep increasing in price,
right,
right?
right,
So, in my opinion, I think you're at a place where the only way that that happens is if inflation remains a real problem. And I think inflation is going to be a center stage issue that we're dealing with for the next 7 to 10 years would be
mm,
my that's my guess.
yeah,
Um, And so, but here's the thing, what you can do, like for instance, if you're saving for a down payment, you can put your money in places that are where it's going to benefit from inflation. So hopefully offsetting any increase in housing prices, and maybe even then having a situation where housing prices pull back and the other investments that you own don't and keep going higher, helping you gain ground on things. But look, the one thing I have learned in my life, and I've learned it the hard way multiple times, is do not ever buy an asset because you are afraid it will not go down.
Hmm.
It's and the reason I say that is because when you get to the point where you're purchasing an asset like home. Now, obviously food's a little different, right? We got to eat. We
Yeah.
got to right? But when you get to a point where the sole reason for your purchase is the fear that the prices won't ever come down, you're probably in an environment where sentiment is to the max extreme, and you're probably right on the cusp of prices pulling back,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
Because it usually points to, that, I mean, think back to like '06, '07,
Yeah.
right? I was one of those people that bought a house in '06. Um, I mean, we all know people that capitulated and were like, I got to buy a house in case these things don't come down,
Hmm.
right? Like in case it never pulls back. And I think I've told you the story before. I was the idiot who was short the stock market, but then bought a house in the summer of 2006. Um, why I think I thought that my house, it didn't pertain to my house or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, tough lesson learned. Won't ever forget it. But yeah, my advice to be people on big purchases like homes right now: keep stacking cash aggressively and wait for an opportunity, because usually, if history is an example, you'll get one.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't envy people who are trying to find a house right now. It's
I don't
soul
either.
sucking. All right, how
Yeah.
about this one? So HHS is coming out and basically linking Tylenol to autism when pregnant women take it when they're pregnant, right? From Fox Business, Tylenol maker shares sync after report says RFK's HHS will link drug to autism. So I saw that the shares for the owner of Tylenol fell, and I think, is that an overreaction? Because like, let's say that they're saying for pregnant women who take it, that's still a pretty small segment of the people who take Tylenol. So in the grand scheme of things, I imagine people would keep buying it, except for maybe pregnant women. There might be a small subset that says, okay, I don't want even to risk it. So is that an over exaggeration for the markets to sink?
Yeah, it is, and it's actually an over exaggeration that we're going to be looking into, because Tylenol is. There's so much in this story, right? For instance, do I think it's an over exaggeration? Yes. What I will say though, that these are overreactions that typically present good opportunities to buy good assets, because you make a really good point. Um, it, just because it, even if it does cause autism, if women are taking it while they're pregnant, um, I'm not going to get pregnant, right? Like so.
You're not?
Uh, well, I mean, apparently I could these days. I've heard that things have changed a little bit, but yeah, there's tons of wonderful uses for it. There's nothing crazy, but here's the other part of it that is interesting to me. Um, this highlights exactly why attitudes and policies and even the floating of the idea of a vaccine mandate for pregnant people. This should go to show how insane that policy is, and that anybody that's telling you it isn't is part of the problem. Because the bottom line is, you can have a drug like acetaminophen that's been around forever, and nobody they didn't think to do in utero trials, and it's like these things are so complex. The human body is so complex. Throw in pregnancy on top of that, and it's so complex that's why this pushback, whenever you hear people trying to stifle debate, and the answer to like autism and vaccines is, oh, that's ridiculous, you're a
Mm-hmm.
vaccine denier or whatever, and you go, okay, but look, I didn't say vaccines are bad. I'm saying that we've got a real big correlation here, and for us to just assume that there's no issue. What are right? It was such a sleight of hand, because the people like you and I are sitting going, wait a second, we don't know what that. We're made out to be like the crackpots, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at them going, Guys, I'm just reiterating the basic standard of medicine that we've always adhered to, and all of these things. You just wish people could sit back and put the dots together. You're like, look, around you is all of the evidence of who you cannot trust. and yet you won't listen to it, right? Who keeps telling you these not? We should be looking at all of these things. This autism thing should be like a
Yeah.
five fire alarm bell, right? There's something going on here we don't understand, and we're willing to look under any rock. I hope vaccines have nothing to do with autism, right? Hopefully they, but we're not going to know until we look into it, right?
Yeah, this
So
idea
it's
that,
just
oh, go ahead.
it's just so strange to me where we come into it with predetermined things and predetermined sacred cows that we're not going to look at. And I'm sitting there going, how is this political? The goal should be to fix the problem. Why is there anything that's out of bounds? Why are there any sacred cows? Right? The number one goal should be let's figure out why this is happening and stop it. Right? How that became political, I still can't wrap my head around.
Yeah, and it might also, some of it, I mean, a lot of it is, yeah, turn political. We should be open in any situation to, if we really believe in science and following the facts, like science has changed a lot, over the last 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. It's changing all the time. Are you saying like we'll really go back to like nothing, we can't accept any changes in science? Well, that's a rude awakening. Let's just go like revert to what we did 100 years ago in the medical field. So yeah, it's weird that people aren't open to the possibility of, what's accepted medical knowledge now and not being accepted medical knowledge in a year or 5 years or 10 years.
That is the entire story of medicine and
Yeah.
science,
Right.
right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we believed bleeding people was healthy and didn't believe surgeons need to wash their hands prior to and we've got example after example after example about how things are evolving, right? Like think back to thalidomide, right? In the 60s, we thought that was perfectly safe, found out it wasn't. Why all of a sudden have we decided that can't happen again? That the powers that be cannot make a mistake? It's just nonsense. I don't get it. And the other thing that I don't get is I remember when big pharma next to big oil was like the most despised by the left.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden you trust them? Why? I thought it's down with capitalism, but we trust Pfizer and Merck? I just okay.
It's tribalism. It makes absolutely no sense. But maybe, we need, and I don't know how you go about doing this, but, there's been kind of leaks and rumblings about the fact that HHS was looking into this link possibly between Tylenol taken during pregnancy and autism. Maybe they just come out and say, hey, we're concerned about this. We're looking into it. We'll come back to you and we'll let you know. So it's not this big, news drop, because Trump came out and he said, if we're talking about, the markets and how they reacted, Trump made this announcement. We're going to have one of the biggest announcements, really medically, I think, in the history of our country. I think we've found an answer to autism, right? And then they come out and it's leaked out about, taking Tylenol during pregnancy. I don't think a statement like that and a tease like that kind of helps. I think we have to try to
No.
depoliticize it in any way we can. And President Trump having this grand, marquee, biggest announcement ever, wait for it. I don't think that's very helpful. Let's all approach it in a very reasonable way. We're looking into this. We'll let you know the findings, and then have some medical person come out. Not the president, not RFK. Have some doctor come out and explain what the link is and how, they went about determining it.
Yeah, I actually think that it's playing right into the hands of the left. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is we've gotta, like we were saying earlier, we got a lot of problems to solve.
Yeah.
We got a lot of problems in this country. And although there's a part of me, albeit the sophomoric part of me, that loves the fact that Trump says those kind of things because
Mhm.
I mean, let's face it, we've all had to swallow so much and listen to so much nonsense.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that just kind of pumps my fist in the air every time he throws one of those zingers out. Then I sit there and I think that didn't get us any closer to fixing this,
Yeah.
right? You've got to give people, especially on something that God has politicized, is all these issues. You've got to give your political opponents a viable path to walk back their point, right?
Yeah.
Especially or their position, especially in an environment that's this politicized.
Yeah.
Like we've got to ask ourselves what our biggest priority is. Is it to dunk on libs or is it to fix problems? And I think if we can truly commit ourselves to that, I think that by definition that becomes a uniting type of energy in the country. But it also draws a very stark comparison to both sides of the aisle. And if because there's one side that clearly is not about solving problems; they're about dunking on political opponents.
Mhm.
And I think participating in that in any way doesn't do anything to help us.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest victory should be solving problems. Like, that's the best way you can dunk, right? It's like, oh, solve the
100%.
border crisis, like dunk, Well,
Yep,
I don't
yep,
know.
yep.
Dunking on libs is fun, though, Zach. It is
Well,
fun.
I mean, it's yeah, it is. I mean, it's also gotten so easy. It kind of reminds me of like playing the hoop on a Fisher Price hoop, where it's like, the rim is like chest level, and you're just dunking with both hands. And no, I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's like I said, it's gotten so easy and so ridiculous. There's no point to even doing it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
doesn't give
I
you the
think
satisfaction it used to.
no, no, and I think the other thing is that we're talking right past the people we're trying to convert. Right? You're not going to convert people that believe nonsense like that. But by making yourself look as sophomoric and as stupid as the political competition, you're also not making your ideology or your beliefs attractive either. So,
True. All right, Zach. Good stuff. We'll see you next week.
all right, thanks for having me.